Hello, everyone.
Oh, sorry, Daniel. Before we start, be sure to pay attention very well because Daniel has brought a very special surprise for the best question after his presentation.
It's
Go ahead,
a
Daniel.
technical surprise, so it's a thing. You can take it with you after the presentation. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for surviving the party. I came here at 10 a.m. and it was wasteland. Sort of, it's good to see more people. We are going to talk about game project management basics. Martin, previous speaker, already mentioned some of these topics like scope, tools, and so on. I'll try to cover it in a broader way and from my project management specifically. So, before we proceed, let's meet each other in a bit. I have a question for you. Please raise your hands, those of you who has a project management title, or like exactly called, like project manager. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, okay. And now please raise your hands, those of you who was or who now handles project management tasks without this title. 1, 2, 3. Wow, it's it's overlaps, but it's not the same. Okay, so I'm project manager at Sperasoft, and we are working as a contractor studio with major developers. And I'll tell you a couple words about me and why I decided to choose this topic. It will be a sort of personal speech. So, I started my career in video game industry 9 years ago as a game designer and story designer. I gradually moved to product and project management and worked in companies like Deuscraft, Nevasoft, and Playrix. Playrix is like most famous among them. During the course of my career, I also got some indie development experience, and suddenly I was a brand manager. So all these companies and projects I participated in are very different in size. Now I'm happily joined Sperasoft. We are working with a lot of different contractors, different companies, and for me, as a project manager, it's actually a great opportunity to investigate a variety of approaches to game project management around the world. So all these companies I mentioned are different in size, business model, and target audience. All these companies has a very different approach on how to manage game production process. All these companies, all these projects, we as Sperasoft are involved, are large and complex. But there are basics even for the most complex things, and we all learn to speak using our ABC books. And a basic introduction to the profession, it is something I would be happy to have had many years ago before me and my team failed or mismanagement some of our early projects. So, thinking about that, I decided to write down my own ABC for game project managers, something universal for every single team, for every single company. And for the next 15 minutes, for the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'll try to talk to you about game project management as simple as possible and appropriate. It all may sound too basic, especially for professionals and experienced project managers. I believe it will be useful for junior PMs and those of you who need to handle your project management, to organize your teamwork, and you don't have separate project manager to do it. Also, I believe that simple things is where usually problem starts, even for the most experienced of us. Devil indeed is in the details, and I suggest us to check these details and problems surrounding game project management. At the first glance, project management tasks doesn't sound that exciting as making a new character or gun, for example. But I believe it is exciting to make game content without unnecessary stress and obscurity. And clear organization may save you tons of hours, money, and nerves. It may even save your game or even a whole studio. It seems obvious for large companies, hundreds of people are involved in complex projects like GTA, like Assassin's Creed, and so on and so on. Large companies have their own production pipeline, tight delivery and marketing schedule, so it's kind of obvious that they have a lot of managers well to manage these things. For small companies and indies, it's not so obvious. In one conversation, an independent developer once said to me that everything with management in its name already sounds suspicious, kind of toxic to creativity, and that was surprising to hear to me as a project manager. Creativity without management looks sometimes like this. And unfortunately, management and creativity sometimes looks like this too. I worked in different companies, yeah, and that's what I learned. Small teams and small projects have roughly the same list of problems as the big ones. They just don't have enough people to handle it as a separate area of responsibility, and that creates a lot of problems. So if you have more than one person working on a project, there will be a miscommunication, like 100% for sure. At some point, someone has to deal with project management issues. And since we all gathered here, it looks like it falls on our shoulder. But it may not be called that way, especially in our very informal game development industry. For example, me personally, 6 years ago, I've been responsible for project management tasks, even when it was clearly stated in my contract that I'm a game designer and I need to design things, not handle everything else. So, yeah, one more thing before we proceed with the main course. I'm not going to talk to you about specific task trackers today, about famous methodologies or practices. When it comes down to project management books, they often describe tools and methodologies, and sometimes it is described as a silver bullet. Just implement it and all your problems will disappear, like in IT, in game development, and so on. It sounds like it fits every team. It sounds like it's simple, it's effective, it's awesome. Sort of holy grail of project management. And personally, I don't believe that that kind of holy grail of project management even exists. But of course, it's up to you to believe it or not, to search it or not. My point is that I believe in common sense, and it says that kind of simple things. Some tools and practices are better for the small teams, and some tools make sense only for 100 plus teams. Copy-pasted solutions don't work, and during my career with all these different companies, I've never seen a sort of company standard or industry standard for project management. All of them are custom-made specifically for a business model, team, project, and project manager specifically. So it doesn't matter what methodology or tools you're going to use. I believe you'll find these basic definitions and concepts applicable in most of them. So let's proceed. Here's my list of project management basic things to know. Goals and scope, budget and team capacity, and task and estimates. As you can see, these concepts are sort of paired, and I believe it's difficult to discuss one without another. So we'll check them step by step. In the end of each section, I placed practical questions. I like practical questions. I believe these are bare minimum, at least for me, because usually when you try to answer these questions, you are getting a lot of new things, new additional questions to clarify, and it's good. So, goals and scope. Here's where product and project manager usually working shoulder to shoulder. Goal is what makes a bunch of random people actually a team, and believe me, I'm saying it without any flair of motivational posters or quotes, like team, like no I for the team and so on. Your goal could be deliver the beautiful, original, never seen before experience, catharsis for your players and so on. Or maybe you need to meet clients or publisher expectations on the quality and deadlines. Or maybe you just want to make tons of money with overhyped topic as soon as possible. It's all valid goals. Maybe it's all of them at once. but in different proportions. So it's up for every team and every company to set their goal and move to it, and good producer or product manager can handle this part of work. But here's an important fact. Without a clear goal, everything else, everything other, all other management practices, sooner or later will become questionable by your team. And usually it's not even sooner or later, it's suddenly. Suddenly team doesn't understand why do they need to do daily stand-ups and so on and so on. So second important part of this pair is scope of work. And it usually looks like list of specific things to do to achieve your goal or to make a meaningful step to reach it. And sometimes it's called a milestone. You maybe heard about this term. And it can contain like something like this, like 3 characters, new game mode, 100 plus levels. And here, a specifics of our video game industry comes to full power. It seems to be a repeating issue for every entertaining industry. Oftentimes, you don't really know what you are doing. And it's difficult for project manager to handle when you don't know what you are doing. Oftentimes, team members don't know whether it's entertaining or not to actually play your game, even with a new game mode, even with 3 new characters, even with 100 plus level. So if you don't know what to do, you have to write down everything you need to find that out. And that's sort of part of product and project management scope of work. You can't include everything, every single possible scenario. Still, if uncertainty affects your project goal, it's your responsibility as a project manager to deal with it first, to ask question, what we're going to do. And it requires to move step by step. So for me, for example, it is normal to have a scope fully dedicated, milestone scope, fully dedicated to remove uncertainties on your path to the main goal. And here comes practical question. I already mentioned one of it. What is your goal of your game development venture? Write it down and check it from time to time, together with your designer or producer or the whole team. It's up to you how you handle these things. And the second most important question to project manager is how to describe it in a logical, how to describe it in a logical and numerical values, like amount of content, delivery dates, hypothesis to check, a person to impress, whether it be publisher, representative, or your target audience, or your mother, I don't know. Someone you need to impress. If your goal has been changed, check your scope. Maybe a part of it has become obsolete and you need to remake things once again. The second important part pair is your budget and team capacity. And when I say budget, I'm not talking about money. Money is important, obviously, and it is always a sensitive topic. Each company deals with it on its own way, but to plan your work as a project manager, you don't really need to delve into this part, into the money part. Some methodologies suggest using alternative currencies like story points. You may have heard about them. But once again, for this specific speech, we are looking for most basic things. So I suggest to start with work hours. This approach also fits situations when you are working on your, for example, non-commercial project or maybe some pet project with your, friends. So maybe you don't want tons of money, you just want to make a simple game. So work hours could be your best currency. So ask yourself, do you know how much work hours of every team member do you actually have for this week, for next week, for this month, for next month, well, at least for this year, till the end of the year. There is a couple of things you may need to consider in your work calendar. Don't forget about non-working days, like vacations and state holidays. And personal health issues and sick days and flu seasons, because you can lose like half of your team in a single week. Oh, and don't forget about expected exams in universities and family issues like maternity leaves and so on and so on. And other important reasons not to be busy with your project. If you're not keeping this somewhere, all these events will catch you by surprise. And even for the team of 5 or 10 people, a number of these events could be significant. And they should be considered before you committed to anything, before your publisher or before your mother. So you need to know your team. You need to know what's happening in their life. Not like intimately what need to know, but just ask them what's happening. How is it going? Are you going to marry? Are you going to go on maternity leave and so on? Personally, I prefer Excel, surprise, to calculate all of it, but you may use whichever works for you best. Point is to get numbers you as a project manager can trust and work with. And here, another batch of practical questions. How many work hours a day you assume you have? Any suggestions from the audience? How many work hours in a full work day you have? Good. At least not 8. Depends. Yeah, it varies from company to company, from team to team. But the point is not 8. The correct answer is not 8, not the full work. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Another case, for example, you and your friend are working on your project after school. It gives you some 1 or 2 hours a day, maybe. Or maybe you're working, I don't know, you expect you'll be working on weekend, and it gives you from 0 to 20 effective hours. But it's kind of difficult to plan when you have 0 to 20 every single week. So yeah, just get your numbers. And the second question, how many work hours you can get from your team till the end of this year with all this I mentioned, like with all vacations, with all flu seasons, and so on and so on. You don't need to place release dates right now. I just try to find how many hours you can expect. And later, it will be easy for you to adjust your calendar, make it updated to your new goal rather than opposite, because goals in game development change often. Last but not least, concept which is usually associated with project management, task and estimates. What exactly do we need to do? We already discussed that we need a clear goal to move and scope to clarify how much we need to reach this goal. But unfortunately, we can't just say, we need 3 awesome characters in this update and poof, here they are. It's not working that way. I've tried it, and I believe not only me. So yeah, every single part of the scope should be transformed into tasks, and they should be estimated as separate entities to connect with the work hours you have. And here we have cool idea, let's add this to the game, transforms to 100 plus necessary tasks, and at least 3 months to do it. So are we really need to do it or not? So I believe it's still a profit in the end, since now you can do an informed decision about your next action. And that's the point of it. So how to create the most basic task? You need to write down what to do, who is going to do it, when it will be ready, and what about blockers, how it relates with other tasks. Without assignee and a clear date, this task will soon become abandoned. And without relations with other tasks, you may miss blockers and dependencies in your timeline. So if you don't know an answer for any of these basic parts of your task, then congratulations, you have another task to find an answer. And someone has to find an answer, we need a deadline to find this answer, and so on and so on. So sometimes it takes more hours than doing the final product. So these are sort of essential terms of contract. Different task trackers allows you to add more fields to it, and the same task may look like this. I believe you're familiar with this field, or something like this. It's kind of the same, but you may make it in different ways. So you can find simple or complex, paid or free, it's up to you. My personal favorite is Asana. Jira is most popular among large companies. Just try not to invent the wheel and just try not to create another task tracker. So, last batch of practical questions. How many tasks do you actually have? Choose your task tracker, write down all tasks you know, both for development and for investigation process. What about dependencies? So game assets obviously may have a lot of people involved. Part of your team can be blocked while waiting for others, so clarify who is blocked by whom. Also, remember that if you need to change something made previously, you may need to revoke all other steps as well. That's how 10-hour estimated tasks becomes 20-hour or 30 hours long. And most important question in this batch, what exactly was estimated? This looks so important for me that I moved it to the title. Unclear estimates seems to be the most common reason to miss your deadlines, especially when you thought you covered everything and you estimated everything. Make sure you are talking about the same things with your team members. So, did you include time for bug fixing or feedback? So is it just a rough estimate you have for 10 hours estimated tasks, or it's only a rough batch, or like rough plus feedback plus fixes? Make it clear for everyone who is involved. The more experienced your team or team lead senior, the closer your estimates will be to reality. Still, you don't have 100% guarantee. Problem happens with everyone. We are human beings. We can miss some things. So, to wrap things up, let's get back to the list. You don't have to start with the first one. Actually, you may start your planning from the budget you have. For example, if you got some non-commercial funding, you have a budget and you need something to do with it. And with this in mind, you can set your goals and create separate tasks after it. When you know your goal, when you know your team budget, team capacity, and exact amount of work to do with a huge list of tasks, you will naturally have to balance them to set a date to move forward it. Basically, that's how it works. Still, it's not a panacea. We all still can screw things up in multiple other areas. And obviously, there are a lot more things to learn in project management, but this can be your first steps. I believe it helps. So, for me, management of creative projects is no less exciting as actually creating content for it. And I've been on both sides of the process, so I know what I'm talking about. I hope this reference list will help for those of you who decided to spend the next few months or years of our precious lives making video games. We know stories about crunch times, about burnt out developers, about mismanagement companies, large and small. I firmly believe that clear project management and honest approach to our work and basic questions, they are all very important. But it is possible to make production process more effective and manageable. It will never be ideal or spotless, but we can make it better. And with it, we can make better games. Thank you.
Thank you, Danil. So let's open it up to some questions. Please raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
1, 2. Thank you very much for the talk, Danil. I want to ask, as an outsourcing company, I think you usually work with external teams, external producers, yada yada, clients and stuff. How do you count in feedback time, dependencies on lag that do not actually, you're not responsible for, your team is not responsible for the lag, possible lag from the external team? How do you count that in your production?
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, it depends from client to client. Some clients have a very strict schedule, delivery schedule, and they already have it covered. Other clients are not, and we have to handle it on our part, because obviously, as you said, we are not responsible for it, but we are responsible for it by the contract. So we are trying to get as much information as we have collected from previous projects, like can we expect a swift feedback, or it could be like 1 month late feedback, for example. So it depends from client to client, and you just need to add some days just to expect a feedback. Obviously, you can't say it to the client, but it works that way. Like, include your estimates on the feedback, something like that. I hope you answered your question. It works like that.
Great question. I have a follow-up, actually. What percentage of, say, managing just personalities or emotions comes into play with project management? I mean, you can schedule everything, you can have it all set up, but there's always going to be the human factor involved. How do you account to that or budget that into your processes?
I'm trying to, me personally, I'm trying to involve leads as much as possible because I don't want to be a bottleneck for the team and I don't want to set estimates for them, especially when I'm not a developer or artist or, well, I've been a game designer, so it's kind of easier for me, but I'm not trying to do it. So team leads usually know their team. They can say that, like, person A he's doing things faster, but we need more time for bug fixing. And person B, let's call it like that, he will make things slower, but he's like a tractor or tank. He'll fix almost everything before he will submit anything. So you need to add your team leads to this process, and they know they're part of the team. And from my experience, it works better because actually team leads understand what they're talking about. Like, they understand their role in the whole process. And I believe it's important because, once again, project management should not be a bottleneck for the whole team. Like, if you have 20 team members and you are the one who actually creates and estimates tasks, it will be a mess. I hope you answered your question.
Yeah, great, thank you. More questions from the audience. Don't be shy, raise your hand. There we go.
Thank you for presentation. The question about estimation, one more. When you're estimating a feature, for example, with your lead developer, and he or she said that it will take 10 hours, do you trust this person that he already included this like 20% buffer in this time? Or do you make in Jira like 12 hours for this feature? Or you're just keeping it in mind somewhere?
I'm keeping asking questions him. What exactly was estimated? Because yeah, it's a common problem. So you as a project manager, you are a main communicator within the team. So actually, the main part of your job is asking questions about what we're going to do. Because you are not developer, you are not artist. So yeah, I'm asking a question: is it rough pass or feedback included? So are you sure about it? You did this before, or it's just your assumption? What we're going to do if it's not correct assumption? Is it affects our timeline or not, etc., etc. So questions are most important thing, part of our job, I believe.
I think we have time for one more question, if there's any more questions from the audience. Any hands?
I just covered everything. You
No
have no
hands?
questions?
But you'll be around after if people want to approach you and talk more about project management.
Yeah, feel free to reach me after. Yeah, I believe we have
Okay, one more. There we go.
Yeah.
Do you have any like documentation that could give further insight on on all the project management?
My personal documentation, or
Not personal documentation, just like things that you would suggest to other people who are willing to learn that.
well, read as much books as possible. Mostly because it's not like you learn everything from the books, but it's good for getting your own context of what's happening in your area. I believe you need to be involved in. You need to know a vocabulary of game developers or of developers or artists. So, for example, I've learned bits of Python not because I'm going to be a developer, but it's good to know what they're talking about. The same with like Photoshop or Maya. I'm not an artist, but I know what's happening on their side. And reading books good for getting your context, but I suggest you to start writing your own books, not to publish, but to summarize all your previous experience. That's basically how this speech was created. I decided to start right from the beginning because 6 years ago, I had to handle it, and I didn't know anything about it. So start writing your own book.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Daniel, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so if you want to grab him and ask more questions about project management, please do so. Round of applause for Daniel.
Yeah,
please.
and I need to, thank you. I need to choose the best question.
I'll come grab the prizes. This is for you.
Sweet. So, thank you. So, I like the question about the client. So, please feel free to get your prize after the meeting. Thank you for other questions. They are important for me as well. And have a great second day of the conference. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks again, Daniel.